We wanted to do a video today for you describing some of the principles of the rainbow body and giving you a deeper insight into this, because this is a really, actually very fascinating subject. When you think about what Daniel is saying with the afterlife right now and the idea of the fact that there is a heavenly realm that we all are going to be encountering, it's a truly fascinating concept. Along with the idea, as near-death experiencers such as Daniel have reported, that there is such a grace, there is such a love, there is such a presence of peace and stillness and tranquility and clarity when you go to this place. It's as if, Daniel, there is an agenda for being human that becomes very obvious to you when you're over on the other side, right?
100%.
And what would you say that agenda is?
Well, you choose to come, which is not as important as that you are chosen. People have to understand, you don't just come into existence when you're a little baby, okay? You don't come into existence then. You've been in existence for so long, and you have earned the right to come to this life. That right has been earned through great deeds. I'm not a gigantic karma person, David, but I believe that deeds are acts of kindness, and deeds grant you higher levels of access in the dimensional realms. And it is that kind, loving gentleness. I have never been any other place but in the most loving, peaceful, accepting place. And the only things that deviated was my focus on things, as opposed to whether I was surrounded by love. But this is how I say it.
Well, tell us the story about the fundamentalist Christian woman who wanted to know about hell.
In the early years of people being afraid about death, and doctors tried to disavow it, and all those things that go on when people are afraid to look at something that is inevitable. For me, everybody, if there is something that's guaranteed and there is something inevitable in your life, and you don't know everything there is to know about it, you will never get a chance to honestly and sincerely live this life. So when I was doing presentations, which I've been doing, God, forever, but this woman raised her hand once and she said, well, two things. The one lady, she says, Mr. Brinkley, why in the world do you think that God would have picked somebody like you to come back and tell this story? I said, I have no problems with that. I said, God had to be scraping the absolute bottom of the barrel. and she had completely run out of messiahs. So she says, I got a good idea. Let's go find a jackass and let's put it off on him. So that's how I got here. So another lady, she says, well, Mr. Brinkley, with the way you're presenting yourself, what about hell? I said, well, honey, they didn't bring it up while I was over there, and I damn sure didn't bring it up. So if any of you are really interested in hell, when you lift out of a body and you go down the tunnel and you come into that place of light, and you're met by a being, it's usually somebody you love, but you really have to understand that that being that you meet is your true self. You have never left heaven. You are here, but you have never left heaven. So when you meet that being, I want you to start screaming, where's hell, where's hell? And I'm sure as cool as heaven is, somebody will accommodate you, but not me.
I'm not going to find out. So, Daniel, the thing that really lit me up about the rainbow body was this book here, as we see on the next slide. It was by Namkhai Norbu. This is the version of it that I had in college, called Dream Yoga and the Practice of Natural Light. And what I noticed when I was reading this book was that, first of all, we know that everybody's heard of the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And they apparently mapped out, through processes like the near-death experience, a series of afterlife realities that they call bardos. And so when we do our class together, we're going to get into the bardo thing, but also...
I call it the blue-gray place. I mean, from being a complete fool, David, a 25-year-old fool, and then and thinking you're the most human, tough guy.
Right.
And then you're dead, and you realize that you're a dimensional spiritual being with enormous amount of responsibility about greatness and dignity and divinity, and that you're responsible as a guardian of that wherever it is that you are, as long as you're occupying this dimension. You don't have any choice but to change. So I looked at religions. I studied religions to find out who knew what they were talking about, because I could tell, based on most of the religions that's in the Western side, they have no earthly idea what they're talking about. Nobody dies or goes through anything that you hear on Sunday watching the evangelist. That does not happen. Sorry.
But there is a whole spiritual agenda to the afterlife, and there are radiant beings of light that you meet. And
100%.
So it appears that the agenda that we all have, that we're all dealing with, is ultimately to graduate from reincarnation. There's widespread evidence for reincarnation.
I've never had, David, I've never had an experience that I could relate in any of the four that would verify near-death, that would verify reincarnation. I mean, my belief in reincarnation came from John Mack. Okay, because when I talk about death and dying, I'm emphatic. I don't care what you think. Okay, but when it's about something that I don't know about, that I cannot speak emphatically about it, but do I believe in reincarnation? Absolutely. This is a gift. This is a reward to live a human life, because when I was over there, and every time I go over there, there is a certain amount of joy and celebration of the courage of those of us who choose and are chosen to come here. Because you come here with every obstacle that you've created to grow in greatness, but you also come to co-create and practice being a God. I mean, and then you just have to turn and watch this. This is what I'm trying to get across to people in these shows and what we're working on. Make a list of everything that you hope God is, quote unquote, in your life or not in your life. And then look around and see how many times per day do you have an opportunity to be too far someone or something that you hope the divine is. So what's the meaning of this life? Co-creation and practicing being a God. What's the meaning of this program we're doing? To take the knowledge and wisdom of you and the insight of mine and create a patterned program for people to look at getting past this insanity and getting on to being and living their life for the reasons they're here.
So Danian, this is a fascinating area, because obviously I haven't had a near-death experience, but I'm not exactly sad about that either, because it involves dying.
Hey,
so,
take my word for it.
Dying and pain.
I'd rather hear about it than be telling it.
Yeah, I mean, some of the stories of pain that you've told me, you remember, you got me running all over the yard. I was so just freaked out about the 4 sections of your spine that are all cracked open, and God, it's just
crumbling.
It's bad. I mean, your stories of pain are unbelievable, but
makes it hard for somebody to tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. No, David, it's hard if I'm trying to get across to an identity within of you, and you're helping me understand about what I went through. This is a reality I'm trying to understand, and as I'm trying to understand it, you're also teaching them, because I can verify. I just had this experience for the first time just over a year ago, and I can identify with this, and if we teach them and they identify with it, then they have a better grip on how to live a powerful life.
Right. So for me, reincarnation is very intrinsic. There's a lot of great research that was done by Dr. Ian Stevenson, who surveyed 3,000 children in the Middle East and found that there were children who could very accurately remember a past life, and that when those children, when he fact-checked their details, the details came true in, I believe, over 1,000 of the cases. And
I met him.
And also the really important part being that the facial similarity is there. They look the same as who they were in the previous lifetime. And of course, there's been a lot of controversy online about my own stunning resemblance to Edgar Cayce. His face and my face are very similar. Maybe we'll have a couple images of that up here right now. But
David, they also, I met Ian Stevenson because he was at the University of Charlotte, University of Virginia in Charlottesville. Raymond went to do his forensic psychiatry work there, so I was there with Raymond. So I met Ian Stevenson. But another thing, and I don't know how this all fits, but he was talking about scarring. There was a whole section about children who had scars or marks that they could tell you where that scarring, and that's what got Ian to really believe, and then John Mack. So I have to agree.
Well, let me just say what that is, because it's important to clarify that. The Ian Stevenson research also concluded that when a person remembered being someone in the past life and they have a violent death, a violent injury, that the site at which the death blow occurred will show up in their next life as a birthmark. So people that got their head chopped off might have a birthmark on the back of their neck, which I actually do, interestingly enough. I have a big red birthmark right here. So that's what you were talking about, is this idea that people get these scars on their bodies in this lifetime as if the etheric body is somehow also wounded at the moment of like being beheaded, and that this etheric wound somehow then shows up as a physical mark in the next lifetime.
A curiosity to work through, a birthmark. I mean, I'm not sure about that, but I'm pretty sure that all of this is about who we really are, as opposed to who we think we are. And who we think we are is not working. If you look at where the world is today, everybody, who we think we are is not working. So I think we need to re-identify ourselves in ways that we can truly see who we are to live the best life we can, because so far we're not doing a really good job.
So regarding the rainbow body and why we're doing this video, getting back to this book that I read by Namkhai Norbu, what Namkhai Norbu describes in this book, you notice that there's an image of a yogi sleeping on the bottom of the book cover. The idea is that there is a place that we all can access that he calls the Mother Light, and this is apparently universal in Tibetan Buddhism. And the Mother Light is this concept of the glory of the Lord, or whatever the heck people call it, the light that people see in the near-death experience. The Tibetans have a belief that your physical body is going to reincarnate, that you're going to have multiple lifetimes, and that by contacting this Mother Light, by getting in touch with this greater intrinsic spiritual reality, that there are a series of teachings that promote the spiritual growth that we're really here to learn. And this book describes how the ultimate path, apparently, is that you don't need to have a regular physical death at all. You actually transform your body directly into light, and your body either shrinks down in size or disappears entirely. And I'm going to actually show you some images of these guys, these monks' bodies, after they've shrunk down to 6 inches tall. So that's going to be pretty cool. We're going to see that in just a minute. But we're getting into the philosophical question of what are we really here for? What are we really supposed to be learning on Earth? And is there a way to take these Tibetan rainbow body practices that the Tibetans have now leaked out through books like Namkhai Norbu's Dream Yoga and the Practice of Natural Light? Can we apply that to our own lives? And the really cool thing for me, Danian, is that we have this monk, this Catholic monk, Father Francis Tiso, who actually just a few years ago traveled to Tibet and actually witnessed the rainbow body transfiguration of this particular monk right here named Khenpo Achos. In other words, it was understood that Khenpo Achos was going to make the rainbow body activation, that he would be able to do this at the end of his life, and Father Francis Tiso was sent over to witness this. And Tibet is a really amazing and beautiful place. There's lots of mountains and beautiful clouds. There's stupas everywhere, as you see here. The stupa is a very enigmatic Tibetan symbol that you see in great abundance. And they have many, many gorgeous temples. You see beautiful rainbow photographs of that here, in which this is happening. So when Father Francis Tiso actually went to Tibet and witnessed this event take place, what he saw was that Khenpo Achos did not die in any normal way. And I don't know exactly how much you're familiar with all this, Daniel, but we're going to be getting into this big time in our class. But just to summarize what occurred, Father Francis Tiso, who was there as a scientific credentialed witness, this is what happened with Khenpo Achos. He noted the day that it was going to happen. He knew it was going to be that day. He was tired. And supposedly what happened is that he fell asleep in a meditation position. He was standing up. His breath stopped. His heartbeat stopped. And then what they did is they laid him out and they wrapped him in these beautiful silk cloths. And over the course of 7 days, Father Francis Tiso was there, and this is what he witnessed. He witnessed Khenpo Achos's body. First of all, one of the interesting things that seems to happen in this rainbow body activation, very peculiar, is that if there's some cracks in the silk, at times there is, the skin on the face age reverses. First of all, the lines, the wrinkles go away. The skin becomes a lot younger looking and a lot newer looking. And then the body actually shrinks down in size over the course of 7 days.
So it would have to dehydrate.
Something like that.
That's water absorbed. But the body's 65 to 72% water. So as the light bodies would, it would dissipate. I could see it separating oxygen, water into hydrogen and oxygen and dispersing it into the atmosphere.
I think the paradox is obviously that most of the time in any other conventional death, you leave behind a full-size skeleton. The bones do not dehydrate and lose size, but yet with the rainbow body activation, something very peculiar, something very paranormal, as if the essence of the body itself is being transformed. The physical structure is turning into a light body somehow. People also reported having apparitions of Khenpo Achos coming to them after his death, hearing music from the room where it was taking place, seeing rainbow-colored lights over the building. Khenpo Achos started to appear to people in their dreams. They had eyewitness sightings of him, and this all was witnessed. So this has been forensically documented, one of the 160,000 cases on the books that they have.
It's hard to imagine how. I have no doubt from my experience of now I can call them the rainbow bodies because you put them on and you take them off.
Right.
But the only way I could try to describe is molecular essence. I mean, when you get down to, you know, what the composition in space is in an atom, a molecule, and a cell, then that would help explain that it's very, very quantumly, physically, and in physics possible to achieve what you just described.
Sure enough. You know, the mysteries are vast, and we don't really fully understand why this happens, but it appears to be the graduation from the Earth School, once you've really nailed everything down and figured this out. Now, I want to talk about something else in this video, which is the second Buddha, Padmasambhava. So let's go back to the slide real quick. Because Padmasambhava came in and improved upon the teachings of the Buddha that, you know, allowed for this rainbow body graduation to start to happen. So there seems to be some pretty clear evidence that Padmasambhava was some kind of extraterrestrial, because in the mainstream Tibetan lore, Padmasambhava did not have a mother or a father. They say that he arrived in an egg that came out of the sky. Well, that's probably the best thing they could use to describe some kind of a craft that opened up. They called it an egg. He told them that he came from the cosmos, so he directly stated that he came from outer space, from the stars. And he had remarkable abilities as soon as he arrived. He could do telekinesis, levitation, all kinds of really cool stuff. Now, the name Padmasambhava translates as lotus born, and they also called him Guru Rinpoche and the second Buddha, as I said. The term Guru Rinpoche translates as precious guru. Now, Padmasambhava did study Vajrayana Buddhism, the prevailing Buddhism of the time. He was a scholar of that teaching. And he traveled all throughout the regions of Nepal, Bhutan, India, Tibet, and southwestern China. So one of the strange things that I've noted before, he does look human at first when you see sculptures of him and so forth, but one of the things that becomes obvious is it appears that they gave him, that he was painting on his own eyebrows and his own mustache. And this is one of the pictures that shows that. This is an image of Padmasambhava as he would be flying around because he did apparently levitate. And then here's another image of him where his eyes look pretty intense, pretty wild. Now, Padmasambhava had this odd face where, as you can see in the pictures we just saw, he didn't appear to have eyebrows or a mustache, that they were penciled on. That is consistent with the reports that we have of many different types of human extraterrestrial sightings. Mm-hmm. People that look a lot like us, but there's something different, like maybe they don't have the eyebrows or facial hair or any hair on their heads whatsoever. Yeah. And this could very well be what was going on with him. He might have had to wear wigs or hats or something.
But there's so much mythology and folklore that sooner or later you have to come to conclude that these people are extraterrestrial. Okay.
Well, what's really amazing, Danian, is when we're going to look a little bit later here, that Padmasambhava, once he started to reach rainbow body and practice the same teachings that he developed that we're going to be studying in our class, he actually pushed his hand into the rock outside the cave he was meditating in and melted his handprint into the rock, and it's clearly got 6 fingers. So normal human beings don't have them, but if you look at like the Roswell crash, all the good evidence we have from the Roswell crash is of 6-fingered beings being on those craft who don't have hair, don't have eyebrows, don't have facial hair. So that could be what Padmasambhava is. We don't know, but we can speculate.
And consciously and adequately speculate, because this is new to me, David.
Yeah.
But being able to listen and knowing that I have experienced this in my own life, and then watching the structure of how it comes, it just opens up to so much more possible beliefs in all of the stuff that you're talking about.
Well, and part of why I wanted us to have one of our modules be on the rainbow body is to look at what, we're going to go into a lot of detail in this in our class, look at exactly what the Tibetans were teaching their people to do if they wanted to attain this, and how can we compare that with what you heard in the afterlife, and then how can we apply these teachings to our lives today. And so a lot of this is going to be a discovery process. Danian's going to be seeing this for the first time along with you as we go through it in the class. But what I already know you have waiting for us is all of the understandings of how your experience with the afterlife and with these rainbow body beings that you were seeing fits in with what the Tibetans were teaching us.
I'm agreeing.
Because you already acknowledged, like, you didn't personally encounter information about reincarnation in your afterlife experiences.
I won't ever say that I did.
But others have.
Right.
And so we want to aggregate as much of this information together as we can, try to come to a common understanding.
And to make their lives today positive. We have to change. We have to. Okay? And if we don't come at it from the way that mixes the two sides to give clarity in this overwhelming sense of fear and death, we're making a mistake. I mean, we are responsible to people to bring this viewpoint so that they can either trust it or not trust it and build off of it or not, but at least they have that option.
Right. So let's take a look at this next slide, because here we actually see, this is apparently based on eyewitness testimony of the rainbow body activation. And so, as you can see here, the image, and this is of Padmasambhava's ascension. Now, Padmasambhava had an interesting case where he instantly transferred into light. It didn't take 7 days. He didn't leave anything behind. There was no body left behind. It happened just in a flash. And so this illustration that you're seeing and others like it are based upon the eyewitness testimony of what they saw. So it would appear then that his body becomes transparent or translucent, and there's this pinwheeling, rainbow-colored set of, like, the pinwheels have different colors of the rainbow in them, and apparently they were spinning around, and it was like roughly the size of a sphere around his body. Mm-hmm. So people saw a spherical aura around him of rainbow-colored light, and it was very bright and it was very joyful. There was sound associated with it. There was feelings associated with it. It's this beautiful swirling rainbow activation, and then that was it. He disappeared.
Vortex.
Yeah.
Dimensional shift. I get it. I get it. And you know what, David, it's amazing when, as like you said, me learning it and listening to it, I already know what it feels like. I already know what it sounds like. But being able to give people a way to look at the experiences I've had is why I wanted to partner with you in these programs.
Sure.
Because you have insight that helps bring clarity to things that I don't know yet how to language, but us in conversation gives me the language. Because, hey, listen, everybody, do not not pay attention to what we're doing today. Do not pay attention, because how it cohesively works for us as we move forward into this new life we have to create, it will benefit us.
Sure. So I want to go over a couple things about Padmasambhava. First of all, he brought Buddhism from India to Tibet in the 8th century. This was the first time that had happened. He brought it over from India. The indigenous Himalayan religion of Tibet and the area was called Bon at the time. And everybody that was around him saw that he had extraordinary capabilities. He could fly, he had telekinesis, he could do apports, which is manifesting objects out of thin air. He could hear your thoughts and communicate with you telepathically. And so he very likely was an extraterrestrial.
Typical alien.
Yeah.
Typical extraterrestrial.
But not very many extraterrestrials come here and then activate their rainbow body on Earth, and that's what's so cool. So he melded the Buddhist teaching with the indigenous religion of the Bon, and this created what they call the Nyingma sect, which is Tibetan Buddhism as we now know it. During the same time, there was some really cool stuff going on. This is in Indonesia, in Jakarta, that there is the temple of Borobudur, and this is around the same time frame. You see this, it looks like a pyramid, but it's in Indonesia, but it's seriously similar to the step pyramids that we see in Mesoamerica, which are theoretically a lot older. So this temple was built by the king of the Selendra dynasty in the 7th, 8th century. It's located in Magtong. This is in the middle of Java Island, actually in Indonesia. I said Jakarta. I believe Jakarta's on Java Island as well. It was built in 9 levels to symbolize the 9 yanas in the Buddhist religion. So,
it's always 9 levels in Mesoamerica.
Oh yeah.
You have to look at the continuity, look at the step pyramid, look at Saqqara, look at the step pyramid, look at Zoser. Okay? It's not 9 levels. It's not 9 levels, but you know, it means that the structure by which people seek attainment, the Tower of Babel, there is a common current within every temple culture that these levels of attainment become consistent in temple building.
Mm-hmm. So here we're seeing a picture of the temple from the side, and I just want to remind everybody that, like, it's very, very difficult to build a monument of this size out of rock at such a gargantuan size, and so for this to be done in the 7th and 8th century could very well be from extraterrestrial influences, just some of the most recent ones before the extraterrestrials gave up and stopped doing this kind of pyramid stuff for us. Padmasambhava spontaneously burst into this rainbow-colored light as the end of his life, as we saw. This was a great surprise and inspiration to all of his devotees, and as we were saying, there's since been 160,000 documented cases of people achieving light body since then, thanks to Padmasambhava's teachings. Now, let me just stop there for a second.
So multicultural?
Yeah, this is the Tibetan Buddhism, southern China, India, Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan, that whole area.
Really multicultural.
And so I would just want everybody to remember that in order for the Buddhists to come out and say that there's 160,000 cases on the books, this is incredibly serious. You can go in there and they have detailed records of each person who achieved rainbow body. They have the person's name. They have their biographical background. They know where they were. They know what age they were. And the whole manner in which this was documented was extremely meticulous. So, honestly, Danny, and now that we have in our society, we're starting to have a much greater awareness of racism with the George Floyd murder and the stuff that we're now looking at. It does drive me crazy that when you have a Catholic priest, Father Francis Tiso, who actually travels to Tibet, witnesses this rainbow body activation happen. They have very detailed records that I'm sure they wouldn't mind having our scientific community audit of the names and the dates and the years and the biographical backgrounds of these people and how they did it. 160,000 times that people have hit this rainbow body.
But it's just the techniques. Everybody's uniquely different, okay? And the kind of discipline, I don't yet know the techniques unless you go into cardiac arrest. Now, if you go into cardiac arrest, I know all the techniques necessary to deal with the rainbow body.
Well, we don't actually want to kill people in this class.
This is my point. This is my point. But understanding from my point of view that this is really true, that there is a level of entry back and forth, that this happens, and by listening and watching this, I know that whoever brought this knows dimensional travel. No matter what you describe death as, quote unquote, when you stop breathing, you shift dimensions. You leave this body here, okay? You leave it because most people don't know the rainbow technique. But I know that you shift into another dimension and you stay cognitive of this dimension for a certain period of time before you travel, before you know that there is a break from this reality into the next reality, down the tunnel or across the meadow, or beings being present and those things. But I have seen beings that were rainbow celestial beings before. So as you describe this as an extraterrestrial possibility, then it makes me second guess the light beings that I saw in the near-death experience. It makes me stop and look at that, okay? If there are beings who exist in that level, then all of a sudden I am an extraterrestrial too. Or maybe all of us are extraterrestrials or some hybrid connection, which is a possibility.
And the rainbow body practice, Danny, and one of the things that's hilarious is how seemingly unobtainable it is for us in the Western world. And I think that's kind of the point, because all you have to do is have only loving thoughts all the time for 13 years. You don't get angry, you don't get mad, you don't get impatient. You're just happy and calm and forgiving and loving for 13 straight years with no deviation.
Well, I'll never do it that way. I've already failed that course. But yes, I'm going to take it because there's got to be shortcuts.
Well, I think that the point is there's a lot from this that we can apply, and there's a lot of specifics in terms of what their teachings are. And I don't believe it's attainable or realistic that in today's world we're going to have 13 years of no negative thoughts. But in the Law of One series, which if you are a regular participant in my online work, then you have heard me talk about this many times. This was an intuitively revealed set of materials, written materials from 1981 and 1983 that forms the underpinning of my work. It's the spiritual basis and the scientific basis. And in the Law of One, it does say, for what it's worth, that if you complete all of the tasks that you are intending to have as a soul for being alive in a human form, that at that point you get to leave whenever you want.
I believe that.
You can, and your body transforms back into pure light because you've finished the whole curriculum the universe is here to teach you.
I have seen, David, think of this. Nobody leaves before their time. Will not happen. But I saw a lady who was like my best friend growing up, TM, his mom, Estelle, I watched her wait for her sister to come to see her. She had emphysema so bad. It was a horrible, horrible transition. But she held out and she drank a half a glass of water a day, waiting for her sister. Her sister walks in the door, comes in the room. She's down to maybe 62 or 3 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
She comes in the room, she sees her sister, and her sister has been driving. They hug, and she says, I have to run to the restroom. She went to the restroom, and as soon as she walked out of the door, Estelle let go.
Wow.
Don't try to tell me 51 days on a half a glass of water is possible, okay?
Right.
That is impossible. So in my own life, that knowing Estelle from the 4th grade till she passed in my 30s, I saw a miracle. The miracle of the power of what somebody seeks to achieve in this form. So as I listen to this rainbow body and caring about each other, I want to bring it to right this moment. Remember, David, those forces that are trying to create the deep state or those higher esoteric, lunatic, murderous, destructive forces, they know what you're trying to teach. And they're going to do everything to keep people from getting this information like we're trying to bring forward. And they are going to create enough damage and destruction so that you can never really truly focus on the reason why you're here. Loving thy neighbor as thyself, doing to others you have others do unto you. Okay?
It's astonishing, Danny, and the fact that this is so it's so widely documented in Tibet. We have more than one case of eyewitnesses in modern recent times looking at this.
And a Catholic priest who's probably a scientist.
Yeah, and nobody ever talks about this. I'm one of the only people to even report on the rainbow body information and present the information within the UFO/consciousness community. You just don't hear about this, and it should be like the most important thing that we're talking about. If spirituality is not a fake, and if there is an agenda for why we're alive on Earth, and there is a destination.
There is no doubt. You are chosen to come here because the divine believes there is no one better than you to be born where you are in the situation that you find yourself to co-create the goals of the divine. And then you choose to come here because you set up obstacles for you to overcome to achieve personal goals. There's 2 completely different reasons for why you're here. We all get them confused, but there are 2. You're chosen and you choose. And if we get this program exactly where we want it as we keep working on it every day, then making these cornerstones in a person's life, because I wouldn't be here telling you if it wasn't the truth, and looking at how mythologies, as they're called, are realities and possible. I mean, I appreciate your drive to bring this information forward, David, and I appreciate you allowing me to participate because I bring some value, but I can say categorically, I believe that and know it's true, or I can wonder, or I can grow in myself.
Well, it's nice to have somebody to talk to about all this great research that I've done. And you certainly have your own perspective that I don't have, having been on the other side. And I expect that as we unpack, because, you know, we're going to be doing some discovery. There's going to be live discovery as you're seeing these teachings for the first time and getting your reactions based on what you had in the afterlife. It's going to be very exciting. But
wow, what a great idea, David. Wait a minute, what a great idea.
Yeah, I like to give you the element of surprise. That way we get discovery on camera.
I think that's great. No, come on, thank you.
But I want you to see some of these images of the rainbow body and then people pushing their hands and feet into rock. We're going to have a lot more of those in the class, but I want to go through some of that now. So getting back to the slide again, the central practice that Padmasambhava came up with is called Dzogchen, and it is also known as Ati Yoga, or the Great Perfection. Of course, the Great Perfection of human life and what you're here for. So Dzogchen, what they say in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, Dzogchen, that word means the natural primordial state of our being. And all their teachings and meditations are aimed at achieving this condition of Dzogchen. They call it the pure, all-encompassing primordial clarity, and they say that this is the true nature of all beings. This is timeless and it has no form, and yet it is the nature of the universe. So they really, really stress that it's just empty awareness. They use the term empty awareness all the time in describing this, or at least that's how it translates. A timeless clarity that has no form of its own. This is the source of all the universe. And yet it is capable of perceiving, experiencing, reflecting, or expressing all form. And it does so without being affected by those forms in any ultimate permanent way. It is like a mirror which reflects with complete openness but is not affected by the reflections. So it gets a lot more complicated than this, Danian, but...
It's pretty complicated as it is, David.
Well, we'll talk about that. This is mirrored in a lot of other esoteric scholarship, and people who have had near-death experience that see the mother light. They always say, this is home, this is home. So it appears that what the Tibetans are actually telling us is that the white light that you've seen and felt, and that many others have seen and felt in the NDE, that when you look at that, you're actually looking at the only thing that really exists in the universe.
I agree.
And that light created the whole universe and us.
And you are a part of it. And you recognize you are a part of it, but even more important, you recognize that it is a part of you.
Right.
The great separation, David, the great separation is being alone and being helpless. Okay, these are two of the driving fears. A virus can kill you. But being alone and being helpless, over there, you are never alone and never helpless. You are connected to a force and a stream of consciousness that you are a part of its creation. Not only are you a creation of it, you are part of what it is creating. That is the secure comfort in language of where we are.
So one of the simplest Tibetan meditations that achieves rainbow body over time is they will look, they'll be in front of a view, so they'll look at like mountains, because there's lots of beautiful mountain views in Tibet. And they'll be looking at this and they are meditating on the concept that they are the sky, they are the mountains, they are the stars. And so your awareness, the awareness that you think with, the awareness that you're meditating with, this is really the key, because it's a meditative practice. The awareness that you meditate with is the awareness that all the universe emanated from, and you want to see yourself as that awareness. Not as separate from the awareness, but that you embody it and you become the awareness. And apparently, once you have sufficiently become the awareness of the rainbow-colored light that the universe is made from, your body just phase shifts back into it.
I believe that that's highly possible. I mean, you know how much meditation it has to have taken to achieve that goal, or how many millennia you would have to be alive that you could come here. How this guy got here is the same way he left.
Right.
He just appeared. He
Right.
came dimensional. Instead of extraterrestrial, he becomes almost interdimensional and could manifest a body.
And remember that after these guys achieve rainbow body, they start appearing to other people in the spiritual form, in dreams and even in waking visions as like a ghost.
Reinforcing.
And encouraging them on their own path.
Yeah, reinforcing their system.
So this again is what the rainbow body activation actually looks like. And another thing that I really, really am excited about and I wanted to share in this video is some of these mandalas that the Tibetans have seen when they are approaching the rainbow body, when they're approaching the mother light. They don't just see the mother light as pure white light, they've actually seen it as a geometric pattern, as a mandala. So this is the Vajravarahi mandala, and you'll notice right off the bat, Danian, how similar it is to the Hebrew symbol of the Merkaba. You know, that it's the same exact symbol, the two triangles. There's multiple images of this. And again, what they're saying is, this is the origin of the universe. This is how it all started, that this is what you see, that the universe emanates from. And sure enough, as you already know from seeing some of my other work, this is now very much in tune with modern science, looking at the universe as if it is all a holographic projection of consciousness.
And I believe that's also true.
Absolutely. So going back to the slide now for a minute, we've all suffered through this perpetual belief that mathematical equations like the ones you're looking at now are necessary to solve the mysteries of the universe, that the mysteries of the universe are all going to come down to very elaborate arcane equations that we have to solve only by having an advanced degree. But Danny, and I think that the evidence, when we look at this mandala, and I'm going to show you in just a minute how that connects to modern scientific discoveries, that the latest science essentially says that the universe does not exist except that there's one pattern, one form. And this form absolutely appears to be the Star of David in its basic geometric structure. And we'll show that in just a minute. So with that in mind, I think the idea here is that the Tibetans in this meditative practice, you get all the answers. You can learn what the universe is, and you can learn that it's yourself. And I think it's that personal connection that the equations pull us away from. We think, oh, I got to learn all this science.
I'm agreeing.
No, this is...
Energy equals mass times the constant to the second power. I don't even believe that that's true, okay? Once you start looking at the geometrical configurations, I met the Dalai Lama. I met him because I was supportive of Free Tibet in the 90s. Mm-hmm. And I would do things, and he gave me his scarf, and he gave me this little bag that he had, and he was thankful because I had supported with Conscious Life. They were doing those madonnas, and I supported that. But when you start to look at this, the symbology of the Merkaba, and the symbology of how this all operates in geometry is a whole lot more advanced than equations.
Right.
You know, it's a living, functioning, creative, divine force that seeks to reflect love back and forth. And like you said, for 13 years of clear, wondrous thoughts, I believe that anything is possible if you can hold that level of consciousness for at least part of a day. You're already there.
Absolutely.
But you know something else? Let me say one thing else, David. It is so amazing that what the near-death experience has done to reinforce so much ancient lore. Just like what this person here is who came, his stories are there in all of India and all of the stories of the battles and the wars. I can verify what this person is saying to be true, and he even had a name for it, a description of it, how it functioned and the way it worked.
Dzogchen was the name of the primordial state of being, yes.
Mm-hmm. That's so wonderful.
So let's check this out now, because this is really exciting. I've talked about this many, many times, but in case you haven't seen the David Wilcock stuff, we'll just do it again. This scientist, I believe he's from Sweden or Switzerland, Dr. Hans Jenny, studied what happens when you vibrate fluids at pure sound frequencies like the white keys on the piano. And so what we're seeing in this illustration here is what happens when you take milky, cloudy water. Now normally, if the muddy water with little particles in it, the particles are called colloids. If this muddy water is just allowed to sit the way it is, all you're going to get is a big white blob on the picture. So what we're seeing here in this instance is what happens to the sand particles, which are all the white areas, when you vibrate this water drop with pure harmonic sound frequencies. So this mysterious structure, this mysterious Merkaba shape, it's the same shape we're saying that the Tibetans saw as the origin of the universe, right? You get that shape by just vibrating water and then having enough particles in it that you can see what the water now looks like.
And what the water's doing.
As it's vibrating. When we look at what happens when you change the frequency of sound, it gets even more interesting, because all we're seeing here is now the same droplet of water with the same particles of sand and two different sound frequencies being played. The one on the left obviously has a lot more of a square and cubical type of thing going, because remember, this is a three-dimensional drop of water, so this does have depth and dimensionality. It's not flat. It's a three-dimensional pattern. Just like the Merkaba on the right is going to be a three-dimensional pattern. Look how much the structure shifts, and then in this case, we're seeing 9 different phases of what the sand does based on different sound frequencies. And I've talked about this many times because we know that the most advanced geometric descriptions of higher dimensions, there's enormous amounts of equations that they use to calculate this geometry, but the scientists are all pretty much in agreement that higher dimensions will have this kind of geometry in them, what they call the Platonic solids. So let's go back to the slide again real quick. There's only 5 of these shapes, okay? We have, going from clockwise, we have the tetrahedron, we have the octahedron, we have the icosahedron, we have the cube, and we have the dodecahedron. And here's another illustration of these 5 shapes. So what we're saying here is, and this has actually been proven in a variety of ways, that the universe itself appears to behave like there is a fluid everywhere, like we are bathing inside some kind of liquid or water or something that's liquid-like in the way it behaves. We can't see the water, we can't measure the water, we don't know the water exists, but the water itself is the universe on one level of thinking about it.
The Higgs boson particle, they call it the God particle, but when they proved that it existed, they call it dark matter. So they've not only given it an existence, they've given it a name because space is dark.
It's true.
What a funny name for the divine.
We get into the Higgs boson in a second, absolutely. But I want you to just look at these images again and understand that these are your 5 basic shapes that will appear in water when you vibrate it at different sound frequencies. These are the 5 main patterns that you're going to get. We didn't see all of them in the shapes that I was showing you from Dr. Hans Jenny's experiment, but Buckminster Fuller actually proved that these shapes appear in vibration. The way he did that was he took a spherical balloon that was white, and then he put it in a blue dye, and he vibrated that perfect sphere at different sound frequencies, and the dye would stain the areas of the balloon that moved the least. And Buckminster Fuller showed all 5 of these Platonic solids would appear over the surface of the balloon depending on what frequency you vibrated the balloon at. So these are the primordial shapes of vibration. So it's a very curious thing. It's a whole new way of looking at it. When you look at these particular patterns, you're not seeing them as geometry anymore. You're seeing them as natural vibrational crystals, if you will.
And he built houses. He built forms.
Dome homes, yeah.
Just like this.
Yeah.
I mean, so he was...
Because they're so strong.
But he was taking it and creating an environment that's within the natural formation of the dark matter, or what we're all bathing in. I agree with that, David, so much, because when you get to the other side, physical stuff has no importance. You never conceive of physical, you know, maybe in the first moments.
Right.
Because the nature of who you are is clear. The nature of where you are is also clear. And you know the place so well, it's like going to grandmother's. It's like what happens when you get out of the car at grandmother's and knowing dinner's ready. Okay, that's the feeling. Okay, so once you have that feeling, there's no difference. But I appreciate Buckminster Fuller a lot more now.
So this is just one of a series of things that are out there talking about how there could be, in fact, a liquid superfluid that's like an underlying energy that the universe emanates from or is made from. Are we living underwater? And then this is the same article that was being described there. Well, the idea is, if the universe is in fact made of dark matter, as you were saying, and if it is like a superfluid, then As the fluid vibrates, you get these geometric patterns.
And the birth of planets and the birth of...
Ultimately, yeah.
The
when
birth
we go
of stars and, you know, look at...
A lot farther along.
Yeah, but you're describing how it's
Yeah.
occurring. So people, there's the Big Bang Theory. The Big Bang Theory loses a lot of pump when you start describing it the way that you're describing it.
There very likely is an origin of the universe, but it's probably more like a seed turning into a tree than anything else. All right, so now we're poised for this to really, really get interesting because we have already seen that vibration creates geometry in a fluid. We know that the geometry looks the same as the Vajravarahi mandala, which the Tibetans say is the source of the universe. And I've gone through so many rounds of, you know, scholarship on sacred geometry, studying how it appears at the quantum level with atoms and with the structure of the nucleus, the structure of the electron clouds. We've talked about it with the DNA molecule, and this all was covered in the class we just did, The Great Awakening, but we didn't get into the really fascinating applied science where that geometry shows up to the visions of people that actually see the origin of the universe. So now science is catching up. So check this out, Danny, because I don't know if you've ever seen this before quite like this. This article came out in Quanta magazine, and when I saw it originally, it absolutely blew me away. In 2013, this article came out that you're looking at now in Quanta magazine called A Jewel at the Heart of Quantum Physics. And I ended up reading this on an airplane. I was on the airplane, I was on the aisle seat, and when I saw this, as a nerd, as a fully guilty nerd, nobody's going to deny that. I am a geek as far as it can go. A silly, seemingly silly technical scientific article had me so excited I literally wanted to unbuckle my seatbelt and run up and down the aisle with excitement because I was so thrilled about what this thing means. What they were writing about in this article is two scientists, and here are their names. And I practiced this in pronunciation. Nima Arkani Hamed and Yaroslav Trunka. They both have studied or worked through Caltech, and they cracked the greatest scientific puzzle in modern history, which is to understand the real basis of the universe. And their conclusion, after all of this exotic quantum physics and heavy-duty research, is that all of space and time is the emanation of a single geometric form. So right there you can probably see where this is going.
Exact same point. Here we go.
Now let's just trip out on that for a second, because even before we get into the number crunching, what these guys were doing was they were following up on work from Sir Roger Penrose in the 1970s. And Penrose was having routine arguments, academic arguments, with our classic favorite, the guy who is always, you know, the brief history of time, and he's handicapped. He's in the wheelchair. I'm trying to think of his name off the top of my head. I don't know why I fluffed his name. God, what is his name? Stephen Hawking.
God, I was trying to figure out who you were talking about.
So Stephen Hawking was having these debates with Sir Roger Penrose, in which Stephen Hawking is the typical mainstream scientific view of the Big Bang. A lot of his material made that theory. But Sir Roger Penrose in the 1970s is saying, no, it's not the Big Bang. It looks like it's some kind of geometric pattern. And that's all that really exists. So when you brought up the Higgs boson before, the Higgs particle is also the same idea, that there's only really one particle in the universe and that everything is an emanation of that particle.
Or a frequency or a vibration of.
So we're going to see, in just a minute, we're going to see the actual illustration that Sir Roger Penrose came up with for what he felt the universe was emanating from. He was able to solve a great deal of the physics problems in quantum mechanics with this one shape, but he couldn't get it all. So these two guys went back to Roger Penrose's work. They refined the shape, And once they fixed the way that the shape looks, everything checked out. In other words, they have now proven scientifically that every single different type of quantum particle you can measure, however we do that with the bubble chambers or with black body radiation, however it's done, those quantum particles all can be solved by one shape. That means that everything the universe is made of, everything that we are made of, can be shown to be an emanation from a single shape, which, and you look at it this way, you could think of the shape as being the biggest shape in the universe. In other words, the outside edge of the universe is all within this shape. The whole universe is contained inside the shape. But paradoxically, it's also the smallest shape in the universe, and it's going to be there when you zoom in to the smallest area, because it's not really space, right?
No, it's a structure that creates, that makes us think this exists.
And it also works for time, which is even more outrageous, right? There's no real future, there's no real past, there's only a now.
Presence.
And everything else becomes layers, layers of probability.
But I can believe that, okay? Okay, because every time that, when in the first near-death experience, it was like they were like teaching me, and it was probable possibilities. There are no direct actions. There are probable possibilities of future events based on what we do.
There you go.
One of the big things that I drive home is, in 1975, they said if you keep doing the same things you've just been doing, which was the Vietnam War, by 2004, you will find yourself there again and in worse shape. Well, we were in Afghanistan, we were in Iraq, and we were in Libya, and we were fighting in we started 7 different wars, and by the time we got to 2004, and after, we've been in 7 wars, but by 2004, we were in Afghanistan, we were in Iraq, we were in Libya. So we have to change our probable possibilities.
Yeah, and you were given these future prophecies that you call the boxes of knowledge, and that is going to be one of the things that we go through in quite some detail in our class.
Yeah, what's next? Based on where we are, what you can look forward to, what's next, and how we change it.
So getting back to this concept then, the amplituhedron is the name that they gave for this shape. They also called it, in mathematical terms, it's called a positive Grassmannian. But the amplituhedron is what they believe is the source of the universe. So this is the original illustration that was given. And I was looking at this and I noticed, okay, there's colors on it, there's waves on it, and the waves are supposed to indicate how it vibrates and creates the whole universe by its wavelengths as it vibrates. But it wasn't until I saw this that I got really, really excited, because this was actually, as you can see, it's a pencil sketch illustration of the basic pattern that they say, with only 8 coordinate points, you solve the whole universe for quantum physics. Every particle, everything in the universe apparently emanates off of this. Well, you can see that it doesn't look a whole lot different than this. And this was actually the original illustration of Sir Roger Penrose. So how bizarre, right? Here's this guy back in the 1970s who used this shape and was trying to argue that this is essentially the face of God, if you want to call it that. This is God. This is what we're all coming from. This is what we all emanate from. But he was wrong. He couldn't get everything to work. Now, if you look at this shape closely, you'll notice that there are, in fact, 2 tetrahedrons on it. The top is a tetrahedron pointing down. That means it's like a pyramid, but it has equilateral triangular faces. So you can see there is a tetrahedron up there at the top, a 4-sided pattern that has equilateral triangles on each of its 4 sides. And then also notice that to the left of that tetrahedron is another tetrahedron. And this would be on the lines that you can see here are measured with the number 1, the number 4, etc. So he's got 2 tetrahedrons, but then the rest of the shape, he doesn't have the tetrahedrons. You don't see them. And it's bent, and that's where the mistake comes in. So when they came in and fixed it, now all we have is actually 4 tetrahedrons. Not 2 anymore, but 4. And when you alter the shape, which it took, again, 30 years, more research before anybody, or 40 years really, before anybody was able to do this. Almost 40 years of people looking at this, meditating on this shape and saying, no, it doesn't work. These two guys, Nima Arkani Ahmed and Yaroslav Trunka, solved it. And this, so far, this shape has solved every single quantum vibration that there is, which can take 90 pages of equations to map it out. So here's what I noticed, is that it looks very similar to the three-dimensional Merkaba, the interlaced tetrahedron. And all you have to do actually is just add some extra tetrahedrons on to what's here now, but also the fact that this is made of 4 tetrahedrons, those tetrahedrons themselves, each one of them could be one of these, just that it's in a geometrically inverted position. So now what I'm doing with this illustration is really showing you how well they blend together. So we're going to look at the amplituhedron first, then I'm going to click on this and you're going to see how it just nicely phase shifts into the amplituhedron, into the Merkaba. So then let's go back and look at these Tibetan mandalas again. All we have to do here really is say, okay, maybe Nima Arkani Ahmed and Yaroslav Trunka were able to get this to work without drawing the entire Merkaba, but look at these mandalas once again, and do you think maybe the Tibetans knew a little bit more about this than we do now? In other words,
or the extraterrestrial interdimensional beings knew more about it and tried to pass it on to us.
That's exactly right. So think about, I mean, for me, it's extremely fascinating, the idea that our science is only now catching up to what was left behind like an Easter egg hunt for us to find in ancient Tibetan Buddhist teaching.
And India.
And they're meditating on these mandalas, they're meditating on these shapes as if this shape is the face of God, the original image of creation. And then they're also saying that by holding this vision, by holding this shape, you actually activate your rainbow body. Because you're aligning with what you really are. You really are the Merkaba. And I find it really cool too with the Star of David, right? I mean,
sure.
Where did the Hebrews get this from? Why did they say this was the shape of God?
Well, it comes about from, it was a symbol that Hitler used to identify Jews, is how you predominantly see it now.
Well,
okay,
and you being a Jew yourself, of course, that's your background. So I understand this is sensitive, but I think it far predates the Hitler time that the Star of David was used.
Here's my point. Here's my point. When you go back to Kabbalah, which is where this shape is normally seen in Kabbalah, you realize that during the German times, that German period, they were all into esoterics. They were all into this search for the spear of destiny. They were all into all this kinds of stuff. So how they came to come up with that mark, with that symbol, would have to be entrenched in that. But that's a symbol from Kabbalah also.
Yeah. So it's an ancient Hebrew symbol. We can trace it back. It goes well before Hitler. And it appears to be that whoever gave the Jewish people this image did so because it was the shape of God. That's my argument, you know. And then it's interesting
to note, pretty good argument.
The same thing with the Hindu mandalas, the same thing with the Tibetan mandalas. How did they know? And what's going on here? So as Padmasambhava's teachings continued to permeate through Tibetan culture, another teacher came along named Nyala Pima Dundul, and this is an image of him. And he also was able to achieve rainbow body through this practice. He practiced a teaching called the Union of Primordial Essences, and in 1872, fairly recent, he is claimed to have attained rainbow body in front of 500 physical witnesses. Yes. He left behind a small ashen body after 7 days, and the body was hidden away to keep it secure. So many of his students also were able to attain rainbow body. And let me also point out, Danian, that when we have Jesus' ascension, there is reason to believe that the tongues of fire that went down upon the apostles, that they might have also achieved rainbow body, because in the case of Padmasambhava, when Padmasambhava was approaching rainbow body, there were eyewitness reports of him and a group of his disciples flying in the air like a flock of birds. People were seeing these guys flying around in the air. They could do amazing, impossible things like walk into a blazing fire and not get burned. All these really cool miracles, and then all 25 of Padmasambhava's disciples attained rainbow body after he did. So these teachings actually work. He practiced them and they work.
So in the same time period, all 25 made the transition?
During Padmasambhava, right. After he did it, his 25 disciples all did it.
And then after that, they were seen like gathering like a flock of...
Well, before they ascended, actually, they were already able to fly. So you get some really cool abilities, and that's one of the things we're going to see here is how they'll push their hand or their foot into stone, and the stone that normally would be solid just moves. They actually leave an imprint, and we're going to see that. But anyway, getting back to Nyala Pema Dundul, this is recent. This is 1872, 500 witnesses, and he leaves behind this ashy figurine. So we're going to see some of these figurines. This is an image of Nyala Pema Dundul.
He looks a lot like the original person who brought it.
Yeah.
Did he paint on his eyebrows also?
I have no...
But look,
I think he's a human being in this case, but yeah. I mean, he looks more, to me, he looks like he was a person who just didn't come from outer space, but practiced these teachings the way you're supposed to and got it to work. So, before people actually reach rainbow body, they want to leave something behind to show that they had attained this level of consciousness. So they often will do this with handprints and footprints. Now, we're not going to look at a whole bunch. I'm only going to look at a few. But this is like an inverse image where somebody had taken a casting with some kind of plaster type material of a footprint left behind in stone from one of these monks. But before we get into the handprints and footprints, we're going to go through some recent examples of rainbow body activation. One of the people who did this is Achuk Lama Rinpoche, and here is a picture of him, and he's actually more recent. He was the head of the Nyingma sect of Buddhism in China. This is, again, down by the area of Tibet. He meditated for 43 years with Master Tulku Arik Rinpoche. They established the Yarchen Gar Monastery in 1983, so this is recent. This is a holy city where most of the Rinpoches and Lamas live in all of Tibet. And the largest collection of Rinpoches and Lamas are there in the entire world. So now we're going to see this Yarchen Gar Monastery. And look at how huge it is. They have an enormous, enormous number of people staying there, all meditating together. It's got to be a really incredible, vivacious, vibrant community. So again, here's a picture of him, and here's another picture of him. He actually did attain rainbow body. So if you're one of those internet trolls and you want to get jealous at people and hate on people, you can look at him and say, well, why did he attain rainbow body and I didn't? What's he got that I don't? Well, it's really boring. He's just meditating all the time. But that's what you have to do.
Yeah,
And he lived in this structure, this little temple. Lama Achuk was there. He had normal windows. But even before his rainbow body activation, which remember, he didn't even found the monastery until 1983, he was already doing really cool stuff. He was able to leave handprints and footprints in rock. People were witnessing him mush his hand into the rock like it's made of liquid. He was manifesting little statues out of thin air and giving them to people. He was discovering new termas, which are basically spiritual teachings that you download, and then they start to apply those to their practice. He could go underwater for days without breathing, and he was totally fine. He'd come out, and he was totally fine. He could know the past, the present, and the future with no impediment. He had total ability to see into the future. And he had visual manifestations of deities and mandalas over his body. So supposedly, this is a picture that was taken of Lama Achuk, where it was just normally going to be an image of him sitting there meditating, and what he was able to do was project this image of a lotus onto the camera and project this image of like a light body behind himself. So he definitely tampered with the photograph psychically to make this happen.
Very possible.
Now what we're seeing here is actually after Lama Achuk achieved rainbow body, he left behind a little piece of roughly human-shaped ash that was then, as they usually do, they dress it up in little clothes, and they put it in a little shrine, and they put it on display. And it's locked up, in this case, in a box. So what we're seeing here is what they call the rainbow body. It's really just the leftover body from Lama Achuk. So this, again, was witnessed by many people.
Over 500.
They over 7 days, and his body shrank down to 6-inch figurine, and then they dress it up in little clothes and they put it in a shrine. And they've done this over and over and over again. So it almost, you know, you could even say racist, right? It becomes kind of racist for us to deny something that so many people have seen, something that has been replicated so many times that, you know, there's 160,000 documented cases. And even in modern times, people watch this happen. They watch the body shrink down. They're documenting the whole process. And now they've got the body on display. As far as I know, I don't think the figurines have ever been tested. We haven't ever gotten like a genetic test. Is there any DNA still in the figurine? Does it look like charcoal?
Yeah.
You know, what's the chemical composition?
But if it attained light body, then it would be a sacred vessel as opposed to getting all that tested.
Yeah, and I don't know if they'd really want Westerners like us going in and taking little pieces of the body and running it through tests and stuff, but that's how I think.
But also the manifestation of the dolls and the figurines becomes an important issue because, once again, that's dimensional shifting. If you could do that, I heard stories and I saw a fabulously known sage in India manifest a ring.
Yeah.
Okay. And
these apports are definitely real. But I want to show you another one because there's more than one slide we have of this. So here's another example of this happening. In this case, the man's name was Tirtan Chogyur Lingpa, and this is, again, recent. So what we're seeing here, it's kind of hard to tell, but there's a little guy dressed up there in his little clothes. It's a little bit more obvious here. So once again, the original image apparently is just black ash. And what they do is they put a little hat on it, a little robe. They make clothes for this little 6-inch figurine. They put it on there because these figurines are the proof that this is really happening. Another example is this guy, Chogye Trichen. And here's a picture of him while he was alive. He did the practices. He was apparently a really nice guy. So again, if you're a jealous troll and what's he got that I don't got? Why is he going to have a rainbow body and I don't? Well, he's doing a lot of meditation. He's doing a lot of spiritual work. He knew when he was going to go. He attained rainbow body. His body shrank down over 7 days. And this is what it ended up being when it was done. Now you notice they've got it in a locked box. You can see there's hinges on there, there's glass, and there's a little lock. Probably because some folks might be unscrupulous and want to run off with one of these.
Sure.
Because it's a very, very exciting thing.
And just the fact that it's never talked about or never seen any reports about it.
I know.
None of the story. It just is so weird how, I will say, the powers that be negate so much about who we spiritually are and what we're spiritually capable of doing, even in human form. Mm-hmm. Just like Estelle being able to survive. Look at who we are, everybody, and let this be an example of the greatness of who we are as spiritual beings, even locked into this human form, because this is really interesting and really great.
So let's look at a couple more, and then we're going to wrap this up. Jirao Kenpo, another example of somebody who attained rainbow body in modern times, and here's his little body, you know, of the ash that they dressed up. You can see they always do it differently. And here's another image of that. So again, this is very common. It keeps happening, and they always dress them up differently. Karma Rinpoche, we have some slides of him, because this is a slightly different story. He passed away on November 11th, 2013. Up until recently, as far as I know, this is the most recent rainbow body. There may have been another one since then, but as of a few years ago, like 2017, this was the most recent person, according to Tibet, who actually got this done. 11/11/2013. I love November 11th for that reason. He was 5 foot 9 inches tall, 175 centimeters. By 14 days after he passed away, his body shrank down and the body became only 8 inches tall. So he lost 5 feet 1 inches of height. His entire body, including his skeleton, shrank by nearly 80%. And again, skeletons don't usually go any smaller in size. And this shows he attained what they call the small rainbow body. 2013, this happened very recently. So here he is, and here's another image of him. And this is what his body was wrapped up in after it was done. They always look a little different. And now I'm just going to show you a couple images of footprints and handprints, where in this case, 2 footprints were painted over, footprints in stone. And we're going back a little bit now because when Lama Achuk died, he was the head of the big sect, this Tarchangar monastery or Yarchangar. Over 100,000 people paid tribute to him at the Rainbow Body Activation, and this is the festival. So Danny, and again, come on. 100,000 people show up. You can see it right here. You see the ceremony that this happened. These people keep doing this. They keep attaining this rainbow body stuff. And there are images of whatever they're able to do. They're able to take their hand and they push it into something that's supposed to be solid, like a piece of stone, and they just mush it in.
Electron disbursement. When you look at, if you touch like touching the top of your book, in this life you never touch anything. That's electron disbursement. What you're feeling is electrons. If you took a view, your electron disbursement. So whenever you're that harmonious with you and everything around you, then you see it just like the movie The Matrix. That's what you see it as, a bunch of geometrical configurations. Instead of like looking at the software, zeros and ones, you're seeing something even deeper than that. So to be able to focus into that and to even leave an imprint to it is quantumly very possible. When you get down to just electrical, it's very possible. My point is there is not, this priest should have started this research. This should have been worldwide. This should be people looking at it. Everybody is being blocked from seeing their true potential, David. So once again, thanks for bringing this kind of stuff forward.
The point that I'm trying to make right now, Danny, is that if you have 100,000 people show up for his funeral because he achieved rainbow body, people who are there to look at the little small body, you know, it's widely understood, and yet our culture, you never hear about rainbow body. You never hear about these scientific studies. There's no images of the handprints or footprints around. And to me, I believe what these monks are doing, I was going to say scientists, because they're like scientists in a way. If they become pure awareness, then the rock is just as much them as their physical body.
Agreed.
Right?
Agreed.
The whole meditation is that you become the universe. You become the energy and the awareness of the universe.
It's like the near-death experience. You reconnect.
Right.
You know, you even in physical form, you've never disconnected. You know, people think they're different from who I am and who I am in the next realm. Well, you're you, okay? And you've never disconnected from yourself in that other realm. I know this to be a fact. The first time I wasn't as sure as I am now by the fourth one. But you've never disconnected from there. You cannot disconnect from the source of which you are a part of. And this only reinforces that, like so many exercises we'll put forth in the program, so that people can find the one that suits them, to find that natural harmonic within their own vibratory field.
And I would like to see us finance a way in which this can be done on a much more scientific level, even than what Father Tiso was doing, where we go there and we get film crews and we actually see, if the higher forces will let this happen.
Watch the 7-day process.
To actually film it as it's happening, because it's so many people have seen it.
I agree.
We know witness testimony is provable in a court of law. You got 100,000 people there for his death.
Or the ones the 500 from the original Rinpoche, 500 people, look. People, this is what we are missing. This side of us and this part of our identity is what we're all missing. We have to bring this into play so we don't live in fear. And the capability of being able to realize when you leave here, you take these robes off or these light bodies off and you're back to being you. And this meditation is to become one with all things, is your ability to take them off and still breathe because of the control of that breath during meditation. That's some really cool stuff, David.
It's really, really amazing. And also there is a warning, folks. So we're going to look at this next guy, and the warning is don't show off. If you've ever read the classic book Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, he talks about yogis in India reaching the place where they have magic powers that they call siddhis, S-I-D-D-H-Is. And the siddhi powers include levitation, all kinds of cool stuff, but there's always this warning not to get too wrapped up in your siddhi powers, not to get so excited about it. So we have to look at the point where somebody almost makes rainbow body, but they show off and they get too interested in the powers and they screwed up. And there is an example of this. It's sad, but we want to go into this too because not everybody makes it. An example of somebody who was showing off and blew it is Rangjung Rigpe Dorje. So hopefully he doesn't like torment me in his astral form but I think he's going to be appreciative of this. So
or he's back.
He could be back already, but he almost made it to rainbow body, but he didn't quite make it. And it is theorized when you read about this that it was because he was using his powers to show off. So this particular monk got into a wait for this, Danny, because this is amazing.
Oh, I'm captivated.
He took a hit for the team, but it was so worth it. Because this particular man goes into a lotus posture, goes into a meditative state with Western scientists there, just like I'm saying I'd love to finance something like this. Well, they were studying him, and they were thinking he was going to hit rainbow body. So he goes into a lotus posture, and he actually made himself transparent. And they took a picture of it, and this is the picture. He literally made himself invisible. And so what you're seeing here is people sitting there, seeing this with the naked eye, and then photographing him becoming only partially visible. But you see, the problem is when you start pulling those kind of tricks and showing off, just like Yogananda warns you in the book, he did not attain rainbow body. So this picture, as fascinating as it is and as revealing as it is for the Western mind, I mean, you look at his face, where his head is, and you can clearly see the image of the tapestry behind him right through his face. But that trick, although it has given us something really exciting, which is this photograph, that kind of showing off, he missed out on his big chance, and now he's got to reincarnate and do the whole darn thing again.
Well, hey, you know what? That's all about arrogance, and it's all about ego, and separation from that is the human drudgery that we're all focused on.
Separation from the mother light.
Yeah, because it has to be, everything has to be we and us instead of I and me. Okay, and that's the great lesson I've learned. You know, you have to think in concepts of how it affects everybody, because every breath you take affects people. But just to be able to see this and to do a program that highlights these things that are occurring in the world, and that they are really us, they're really us, and however how we came to that place becomes important in the next step of this programming.
People have a hard time believing that somebody could make themselves partially visible like this, and yet this photograph has been analyzed. It does not appear to be tampered with. It does not appear, there's no Photoshop, there's no funny stuff. They've looked at the negative. But the poor guy, I mean, like, I would have rather get the rainbow body than get that picture.
Or trap himself wherever he trapped himself. Remember, there are stages.
Right.
It's just not all of a sudden you're in heaven with clouds and listening to harp music.
Well, but he had a physical death and his body didn't shrink down and turn into light. He left behind a corpse. And so this was a warning to all the people in Tibet you know, you can do the handprints and the footprints, you can do some stuff, but you can't show off on a big level. So this also makes me wonder, Daniel, whether we would actually be allowed to get the film of the body shrinking, or whether something would go wrong, because maybe it's going to violate free will. But I hope that we could really get...
I think it's very possible. If this priest could do it, and they would allow him to do it, I'm sure it's possible, because it's always about teaching people how this works. And this is someone who understands the reality of dimensions, or cloaks, like I call it. I think it'd be great to sponsor this kind of research. But you know what, David? It's so important that we bring the ethereal part of reality into our everyday human presence, because that is the force that's being used to control and manipulate us, okay? And that has to be stopped. And by doing this kind of programming and crossing these boundaries and borders, gives people more insight to the power and greatness of themselves.
I agree with that.